I was really happy to receive this book as a gift from my friend Clay. This book is called Fairy Tales for Fearless Girls, retold by Anita Ganeri and illustrated by No Lee. So I will read these books for other fearless girls from around the world, and today's story is for Sue as my birthday gift to her. Atalanta, the fleet-footed huntress. Once upon a time, in the sunny land of Arcadia in Greece, there lived a king and a queen who had no children. They longed for a son to rule after them and offered many prayers to the great gods to grant her wish. After a while, it seemed that their dreams had come true when the queen gave birth to a beautiful bouncing baby. The only problem was that the baby was a girl. The king flew into a terrible rage. "I wished for a boy and now I got a girl," he thumped. "What good is a girl to me? She can't ride or hunt or learn to fight, and she can't be king of Arcadia after me. It's a complete disaster. There's only one thing to do." With a click of his fingers, the heartless king summoned one of his men and ordered him to take the baby into the forest, far away on the border of his island. "Leave her to be eaten by wild bears," he said. "It's the best way for us to get rid of the child." So the man took the baby into the forest and left her under a tree. For day and a night, the baby was wailed for her mother, growing weaker and hungrier. Only the birds in the trees could hear her cries. Then, the following evening, a mother bear came shuffling by. She heard the baby crying and wondered if it was a lost bear cub. Reaching down with her big furry head, she gently nuzzled the baby's face. Cooing with delight, the baby reached up and touched the bear's shiny nose with her hand. Then the bear lay down beside the baby, and they had both fell sound asleep. The next day, the bear took the baby to her den in the woods, where they lived happily for several years. The little girl grew up fast and strong, trotting through the woods after her bear mother. Then, one day, a hunter came to the forest and stumbled across the bear's cave. The little girl was frightened, but the mother bear spoke soothing across words. "You're growing up quickly," she rumbled sadly, "and it's time for you to move on from this place. From now on, your home will be this hunter and his wife. They will look after you, dearest child, and teach you the skills you will need in your life." The little girl did not want to go and cried for the bear who had been her mother for so long. The hunter and his wife were kind and welcoming, so it wasn't too long before she felt at home. "We shall call her Atalanta," the huntress said, "and thanks Artemis, goddess of hunting, who kept her safe in the forest until we found her." As Atalanta grew older, the hunter and his wife gave her a fine hunting bow and a quiver full of arrows. They taught her how to shoot and hurl a hunting spear. Whenever they went out hunting, she came alone and proved herself to be an expert shot. She was nimble and strong and could outturn anyone. Soon everyone in Arcadia had heard of Atalanta, the fleet-footed huntress. The forest in which Atalanta lived lay on the borders of Arcadia and the next-door kingdom of Calydon. The king of Calydon, Oeneus, was wise and brave. He loved hunting and tending his vineyard. One summer, the harvest was particularly fine, and Oeneus decided to thank the gods for the bounty his kingdom had given by making offerings for them. In this excitement, Oeneus forgot to thank Artemis, goddess of hunting, and she did not take this slight well. "I'll show them," she said angrily. "They won't forget me again." The very next day, the largest boar anyone could remember came roasting out of the forest. It had 2 tusks, as sharp as knives, and gleaming angry eyes. It tore through the countryside, trampling crops, breaking down grain wipes, and uprooting trees in the orchards. Then it killed all the sheep in the fields. The devastation went on for weeks, and the boar never seemed to tire. Soon the storehouses of Calydon soon empty, and people began to starve. In despair, King Oeneus sent for his son, Meleager, who was the greatest warrior in the land. Together they sent messengers to all the greatest hunters of Greece, asking for their help. The hunters came violently, including Atalanta, who was armed with her mighty hunting bow, arrows, and spear. "Your Majesty," she told the king, "this boar is destroying the forest where I live. I will go with the warriors on the hunt and kill it." Some of the hunters who hadn't heard of her burst out laughing. "What does she know about hunting?" one said. "If she does, I'm staying at home," said another. "Everyone will laugh at us." Prince Maliga had heard of Atalanta and he stepped forward. "You're welcome to join us," he told her. "We're in dire need of your skills. As for the rest of you, shame on you. Are you afraid that Atalanta will prove a better hunter than you?" The next day the hunt began, and it was Atalanta who led the way. At last they tracked the boar to a thicket, and it was a terrible sight to see. Its eyes shone red like fire. Its mouth drooled and foamed, and it slashed its sharp tusks from side to side. Even before the warriors could load their bows, the boar charged, scattering men and dogs, leaving several of the heroes dead. Only brave Atalanta stood her ground. Carefully she raised her bow, took aim, and let the arrow fly. It struck the boar straight between the eyes, and the greatest beast fell to its knees. Then Maliga finished the beast with his spear. It rolled over dead. When Atalanta went back to her old life, her fame was spread far and wide. Her speed of foot, her courage, and her beauty became the talk of Greece. Many young warriors fell in love with her, but Atalanta preferred the freedom of the woods to being married. The trouble was her. The suitors wouldn't take no for an answer, and more arrived to her. Soon Atalanta could stand it no longer and called them all together. "I will marry the man who can beat me in a running race," she declared. "But if I beat you," she continued, "lay down your swords, bows, and arrows to me. No longer will you call yourself a warrior." One by one the challengers came forward, and one by one Atalanta beat them all. None of them came close to winning, and so she soon amazed at the great amount of weapons. Then one day a prince called Melanion arrived. He knew that he couldn't hope to outrun Atalanta, but neither did he want to lay down his sword. So he went to pray to Aphrodite, goddess of love, and she took pity of him. She gave him 3 golden apples and told him what to do.
Aphrodite.
Atalanta gave Melanion a head start when the race began, but as swift as an arrow from a bow, she soon caught up and began to overtake him. Calmly, Melanion took out one of the apples and threw it right in front of her. As the apple fell to the ground, it sparkled in the sun. Atalanta had never seen anything so beautiful and knew she had to have it. As she stopped to pick it up, Melanion ran straight past. Atalanta stood up and began to run again and soon caught up with him. So Melanion took out a second apple and tossed it into her path. It sparkled even more brightly than the first, and Atalanta stopped to pick it up. Again, Melanion ran straight past her, and again, Atalanta ran like the wind to catch him up. Atalanta started to figure out what Melanion was doing. "He's a clever prince," she thought, "but he isn't going to get the better of me." However, just before the finish line, Melanion took out the third apple and threw it over his shoulder so that it lowered off the path. Not even thinking about what she was doing, Atalanta chased after it, leaving Melanion to cross the line first. Atalanta was annoyed. "You cheated. Those apples were enchanted." Melanion hurt her heart and kneeled on one knee. "I wanted to marry you so much that I took advice from Aphrodite herself. I cannot run as fast as you, but I can love you as strongly as any man can ever could. I won't hold you to your promise of marriage because we hardly know each other. I only ask that you allow me to spend a few days in your company. If you prefer, I will put down my sword and leave now, although it will pain me to do it." Atalanta knew that Melanion must have lived quite a life to receive the blessing of Aphrodite, so she decided that they would spend a few days together in order for her to hear all the stories she felt sure he could tell. A few days stretched into weeks, and then months. Soon she realized that she had fallen in love with him, and after a couple of years, Atalanta and Melanion married. They lived happily together for a very long time, but they never raised each other again. Happy birthday, Sue.